Welcome back. I'm Eliott Rodriguez. Jim DeFede is off this week. The longtime managing editor of the Miami Herald is retiring at the end of the year. Rick Hirsch has been a mainstay at the Herald since 1979 when he broke into journalism as a reporter. He covered all the major stories in South Florida, eventually becoming an editor and then managing editor for the past 12 years. Rick has been with the Herald through good times and not so good times, with dropping readership and dropping profits. A lot of people think newspapers are dead. I wanted to know what Rick Hirsch thinks.
Rick Hirsch, great talking to you. You know, when I read on social media that you're planning to retire from the Herald at the end of the year, I stopped to think, I don't remember a time when the Miami Herald didn't have Rick Hirsch. You've been a reporter since 1979. You've been an editor. You've been the managing editor for 12 years. And now you decided to retire. I know you and I are the same age or about the same age, so don't tell me it's because of your age. Why are you retiring now?
You know, it feels like it's time, Eliott. 42 years is a long run. And as you know, in the news business, it's pretty unusual to stay at the same place for 42 years. But I feel like I've accomplished a lot and I'm ready for a change. Retirement will be interesting. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I do turn 65 in December, which they say is retirement age. I've got 8 grandkids. I've had 7 eye surgeries in the last 3 years. All of that, I think, kind of factors into me figuring out what life looks like after the Miami Herald.
You started 1979. In 1978, I began my career as a reporter at the Miami News. And maybe some of the older folks remember the Miami News. It was an afternoon newspaper on the 6th floor of the Herald building downtown. Rick, and I left the newspaper business a long time ago, but for me, it was a great foundation for what I ended up doing. Rick, do people understand what the economic realities have been over the years when they criticize the Miami Herald and they say, oh, look, the Miami Herald is such a small paper, or they're making mistakes. Talk to me about the difference between the Miami Herald in 1979 and what the paper is today, as far as staffing, as far as resources, and as far as the number of editors and what you can do and can't do.
Well, the business has changed a lot. And I would kind of dissect that in 2 ways. One is how the business itself has changed. When you think back of the Miami Herald, any newspaper in America, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we used to have this thing called the classified section. It used to be like 40 pages on a Sunday, and every little tiny line in the classified section would involve people paying money to have an ad there. Classified sections essentially don't exist in printed publications anymore. They become free on things like Craigslist. So that's a big change. The onset of the internet, not just in the distribution of news, but in how people use it and interact with it, has changed the business in ways that are almost impossible to comprehend. They certainly weren't things that I foresaw in 1980.
Will the printed edition eventually disappear and the Miami Herald exist only in the digital world?
Eventually is a long time. I think for the foreseeable future, we will still publish a printed edition. There are people who love the printed edition. We also publish something called the e-edition, which is a replica of the printed paper every day. And I would say that the e-edition is a spectacular product. And every day the e-edition has at least 24 additional pages of news, business, and sports than the paper that's printed. If you think about it, and as somebody who's been in the newspaper business my entire career, it makes me sad. But if you think about it, it's an incredibly inefficient model in kind of a post-digital age to manufacture a product and deliver it to homes. If you think about how much you pay Uber Eats to deliver you a sandwich, you know, $4.99 service charge and a $3 tip and all of that, And then you think about having a newspaper delivered to your doorstep every morning by 6. Well, it's kind of a bargain, but it's also an inefficient way to deliver news.
Rick, I want to ask you about your career. What are the stories that stick out in your mind over these 43 years at the Miami Herald?
Well, gosh, there have been a lot of them. You mentioned 1979, and I interned at the Herald in 1979. I joined the Herald full-time as a reporter in April 1980. So in my first 6 weeks as a reporter, we had the Mariel boat lift and the riots after the murder of Arthur McDuffie. And so those were 2 just epic events. I covered the election of the first Cuban-American mayor in Miami, Javier Suarez. And if you want to think about something that makes me feel like I've been at this a really long time, last Tuesday, his son was elected to a 2nd term.
You've also had the good fortune of working with some amazing journalists at the Miami Herald. Who are some that stick out in your mind as you're getting ready to end your chapter there at the Herald?
Oh gosh. Well, I edited Carl Hyacin. I edited Dave Barry, Dave and Carl, Leonard Pitts, just fantastic journalists, amazing folks on our investigative team. Really too many to count. The Herald's won 22 Pulitzers, and 18 of them have been during my tenure at the Miami Herald, some of which I had a direct role in. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of in my career is the role I've played in hiring and recruiting talent into this place, some of whom are still here, some of whom have gone on to do different things. Some have won Pulitzers here, some have won Pulitzers elsewhere. So that's a great source of pride.
It has been a great career. Rick Hirsch, it's been great talking to you over the years. You've been a friend, so don't become a stranger.
All right, Eliott. Great. Thank you for having me, and good luck.